The distress beacon wasn't meant for them. That was the first mistake the Valorian conclave made, and it would not be their last. When their mining colony on Theta 7 came under attack by the Krill swarm, they transmitted their emergency signal on every frequency their technology could reach, desperately seeking aid from any of the 43 member species of the Galactic Federation. What they got instead was a response from a species not yet inducted, not yet vetted, and certainly not yet understood. They got humanity. Commander Liz Vara clutched the edge of her command console as another explosion rocked the colony's eastern quadrant. Through the panoramic windows of the command center, she could see the dark shapes of Krill assault drones swarming like insects across the crystalline structures that housed 3,000 Valorian civilians. Her people were dying, and the Federation response was at least 6 cycles away. Too long. Far too long. Status of the defensive grid, she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. 40% and falling, her tactical officer replied. The Krill are adapting to our weapons faster than we can recalibrate. At this rate, we have perhaps 2 cycles before they breach the inner sanctum. Lisvara's mind raced through possibilities, each one grimmer than the last. The Valorians were not a warrior species. They were miners and engineers, peaceful extractors of rare minerals from hostile environments. Their defensive capabilities were designed to repel pirates and small raiding parties, not a full Krill incursion. The swarm had come without warning, as they always did, materializing from hyperspace with their distinctive organic ships that looked more grown than built. "Commander, we're receiving a response to our distress signal," the communications officer announced, her crest feathers rising in surprise. "It's not from the Federation." "Not from the Federation?" Liz Vara moved to the communications station. "Then who?" "The signal identifies them as human. Their ship designation is UESS Wanderer. They say they're 3 hours out and requesting permission to render assistance." A murmur rippled through the command center. Humans. The species from the barely catalogued world called Earth. The one the Federation survey teams had flagged with warnings and cautionary notes. Liz Vara had read the reports during her xenology training. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, with gravity 1.3 times standard, an atmosphere that would poison most species, temperature swings that ranged from lethally hot to lethally cold, and predators at every level of the food chain. The fact that an intelligent species had evolved there at all was considered an anomaly. The reports had been clear in their assessment. Humans were dangerous, unpredictable, and prone to violence. Their entire evolutionary history was a chronicle of warfare, conflict, and survival against impossible odds. They had split the atom before achieving spaceflight. They had weaponized everything from sharp rocks to invisible waves of energy. Their literature glorified combat. Their heroes were warriors. The Federation observers had recommended a minimum observation period of 500 cycles before any official contact should be attempted. But Liz Vara did not have 500 cycles. She did not even have 3. "Tell them their assistance is welcome," she said, "and ask them what assets they bring." The communications officer worked her console, then paused, reading the response with growing confusion. "Commander, they say they have 1 ship. Just 1. Liz Vara felt her heart sink. 1 ship. What could 1 ship do against a Krill swarm that numbered in the thousands? The Valorians themselves had 4 defensive vessels in orbit, and they were being systematically torn apart. She had hoped the humans might bring a fleet, or at least a squadron. 1 ship seemed like a cruel joke. "What class of vessel?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer would be disappointing. "They don't specify, Commander. They only say they'll be there soon and to keep our people in the shelters." It was something, at least. Perhaps the humans had some advanced scanning technology they could share, or supplies that could extend the colony's survival. Liz Vara returned to the command console and watched the tactical display. The Krill were pressing harder now, sensing weakness. Their assault drones had breached the outer perimeter and were systematically destroying the automated defenses. In the colony proper, civilians huddled in reinforced shelters, praying to various deities that salvation would come. The next 2 hours and 47 minutes passed in agonizing slowness. Liz Vara coordinated the defense as best she could, rotating shield frequencies, concentrating fire on the largest Krill formations, and evacuating damaged sectors. Her 4 orbital defense ships dwindled to 3, then 2. The colony's defensive grid collapsed to 23%. The Krill were at the walls. "Human vessel entering the system," sensors announced. Liz Vara pulled up the visual feed, expecting to see something small and primitive, perhaps an exploration craft or a light courier. What appeared on her screen made her breath catch. The ship that dropped out of hyperspace was massive, easily dwarfing her largest orbital defense platform. It was not elegant like Valorian ships, not organic like Krill vessels, not crystalline like the Federation's finest cruisers. It was brutal, utilitarian, a wedge of gray metal and angular surfaces that seemed designed with only one purpose in mind. Weapon emplacements bristled from every surface, some so large that Liz Vara could not immediately identify their purpose. The hull was scarred and patched in places, evidence of battles fought and survived. Along the side, in letters that her translator struggled to render, was painted a name and designation. "UESS Wanderer, Dreadnought Class, United Earth Space Service." "Scan that vessel," Liz Vara ordered, her voice tight. "I want to know what we're dealing with." Her science officer worked frantically, then looked up with wide eyes. "Commander, the mass readings are inconsistent with anything in our database. The ship appears to be constructed primarily of refined iron, titanium, and other heavy metals. Its armor plating alone is denser than our best defensive materials. I'm detecting multiple reactor signatures, high-energy capacitors, and what appears to be a magnetic acceleration system running the length of the ship." "Weapons?" Scanning now. "Commander, I count at least 40 major weapon systems, and that's only what's visible on the exterior. There are dozens more that I cannot properly classify. Some appear to be kinetic accelerators, others use electromagnetic principles I don't understand, and several are emitting radiation signatures that match descriptions of primitive fusion devices." Liz Vara felt a chill run through her. Fusion devices. Nuclear weapons. The humans had mounted nuclear weapons on their ship as point defense systems. The communications officer interrupted. "Commander, the humans are hailing us. Audio only." "Put them through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was deep, calm, and utterly confident. It spoke in flawless galactic common, though with an accent that made the formal language sound somehow more direct and honest. "Valorian Command, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the UESS Wanderer. We're reading multiple hostile contacts engaging your position. Recommend you pull all civilians to the deepest shelters you have and keep your defense ships close to the colony. We're going to clear the neighborhood." "Captain Chen," Liz Vara replied, "we appreciate your assistance, but the Krill swarm numbers over 3,000 combat drones and 17 capital ships. Your vessel, while impressive, is only one ship." There was a pause, then what sounded like a low chuckle. "Commander, one ship is all you need when it's a human ship. Wanderer out." The channel closed. Liz Vara stared at the tactical display as the massive human vessel began to move. It did not approach cautiously or attempt to establish a defensive position near the colony. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the largest concentration of Krill forces, a formation of 6 capital ships surrounded by hundreds of support drones. "They're going to get themselves killed," her tactical officer whispered. Liz Vara said nothing. She simply watched. The Krill reacted as expected. They recognized a threat and swarmed to meet it, peeling away from the colony in a dark cloud of organic ships and assault drones. They moved with the coordinated intelligence of a hive mind, surrounding the human vessel from all angles, preparing to overwhelm it with sheer numbers as they had done to countless victims before. The human ship did not slow down. At a distance of 30,000 kilometers, the Wanderer opened fire, and Liz Vara understood why the humans had evolved on a death world. Because they had learned to bring death with them wherever they went. The first weapons to activate were the mass drivers, electromagnetic catapults that accelerated solid projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. Tungsten rods, each one weighing several tons and moving at velocities that made them functionally unstoppable, tore through the Krill formation like a divine wind. Where they struck, ships simply ceased to exist, converted instantly from solid matter to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The kinetic energy alone was enough to vaporize anything in its path and cause catastrophic secondary damage to anything nearby. The krill, to their credit, adapted quickly. They dispersed their formation and activated their organic shielding, a biological energy field that could absorb and redirect most conventional weapons. It was a defense that had proven effective against every species they had encountered. It did not stop the humans. The second wave of weapons were laser arrays. Coherent light amplified to intensities that could cut through starship hulls like hot blades through protein gel. But these were not the elegant, efficient lasers of Federation technology. These were crude, powerful, wasteful devices that pumped so much energy into their beams that the very air around the Wanderer seemed to shimmer with waste heat. The lasers carved through krill shields as if they were not there, boiling away organic matter and leaving nothing but ash and vapor. A group of krill assault drones broke away from the main formation and attempted to flank the human ship, moving at speeds that should have made targeting impossible. The Wanderer's point defense system activated, and Vara watched in horrified fascination as hundreds of smaller weapons tracking systems engaged simultaneously. Rotary cannons, each one firing thousands of rounds per minute, created a web of depleted uranium projectiles around the ship. Missiles with chemical propulsion systems that seemed impossibly primitive and yet brutally effective streaked out to intercept targets. And then there were the nuclear weapons, small tactical devices that detonated in precise patterns, creating overlapping spheres of destruction that nothing organic could survive. In less than 3 minutes, the krill assault formation was reduced to debris. The remaining krill capital ships, showing the first signs of something that might have been fear if such creatures could experience it, attempted to withdraw. They engaged their organic hyperspace drives, beginning the biological process that would allow them to escape into faster-than-light travel. The humans did not let them leave. The Wanderer's main gun fired for the first time, and Vara finally understood the purpose of the massive magnetic acceleration system her science officer had detected. The weapon was a railgun, scaled up to ship-killing proportions, a device that used electromagnetic force to hurl a projectile massing several tons at velocities that approached relativistic speeds. When the round struck the lead krill capital ship, the kinetic energy release was equivalent to a small nuclear detonation. The ship did not explode so much as it disintegrated, scattered into its component atoms by forces that physics itself seemed to struggle to contain. The remaining krill ships attempted to scatter, but the Wanderer was relentless. It moved through the battlefield like a predator among prey, its weapons never ceasing, its targeting never wavering. Mass drivers picked off fleeing ships with mechanical precision. Missiles tracked down those that tried to hide behind debris. The railgun spoke twice more, each shot removing another capital ship from existence. In 17 minutes, the battle was over. The krill swarm that had threatened to destroy the Valorian colony was gone, reduced to cooling wreckage that would drift in space until gravity claimed it. The Wanderer hung in space above the colony, its hull still radiating the heat of combat, a silent testament to the capacity for violence that evolution on a death world could create. Vara stood in her command center, surrounded by officers who were too stunned to speak. Her hands were shaking. In her entire career, she had never witnessed destruction on such a scale, delivered with such clinical efficiency. The humans had not been cruel or wasteful. They had simply identified a threat and eliminated it with the thoroughness of a species that had learned, over millions of years, that survival meant leaving no enemy capable of returning. The communication console chimed. It was Captain Chen again. Valorian Command, this is Wanderer. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We're conducting a sweep of the system to make sure there are no stragglers. Your people should be safe to begin damage assessment and recovery operations. We'll maintain orbit until Federation forces arrive, just in case. Vara found her voice, though it took effort. Captain Chen, I don't know what to say. You saved us. Your ship, your weapons, they're beyond anything I've ever seen. There was another pause, and when Captain Chen spoke again, there was something in her voice that might have been sadness. Commander, everything you saw today is primitive by our own standards. The Wanderer is 70 years old. Most of our weapons are based on principles we mastered centuries ago. We're not advanced, not by galactic standards. We just come from a world that taught us how to survive, and we've never forgotten the lessons." The channel closed again, leaving Liz Vara alone with her thoughts. Around her, her officers began to move, began to organize relief efforts, began to process what they had witnessed. But she stood still, watching the human ship on her display, and realized that the Federation's assessment of humanity had been both completely accurate and entirely insufficient. They had warned that humans were dangerous. They had not explained that humans were dangerous in the way that a force of nature is dangerous. Something fundamental and unstoppable, shaped by millions of years of survival on a world that actively tried to kill them. They had evolved alongside predators, disasters, diseases, and each other, and they had not just survived but thrived. They had taken the lessons of their death world and carried them to the stars. And now they had announced themselves to the galaxy in the only language they truly knew. The language of overwhelming, decisive, perfectly executed violence in service of protecting those who could not protect themselves. Liz Vara sent her report to Federation Command, knowing it would cause ripples throughout the galactic community. The humans had arrived, and everything was about to change. Part 2. The Federation Council convened in emergency session 3 days after the Theta 7 incident. The Grand Chamber on the administrative world of Kelios Prime held representatives from all 43 member species, each one selected for their wisdom, their diplomatic skill, and their ability to see beyond the narrow interests of their own people. Today, that collective wisdom was being tested by a species that was not even in the room. Ambassador Thelcorum of the Methodian Collective brought the assembly to order with a gesture of his primary manipulators. His species had held the council chair for the past 4 cycles, and he had guided the Federation through disputes, trade negotiations, and even 2 minor conflicts. He had never dealt with anything like this. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice carrying the harmonics that made Methodian speech so pleasant to most species. "We are gathered to discuss the incident at the Valorian mining colony and the implications of human intervention. I call upon Ambassador Liz Vara to present her first-hand account." Liz Vara stood, still wearing the uniform she had worn during the attack. She had not slept properly since the battle, haunted by images of ships disintegrating and weapons that seemed to violate everything she understood about proportional force and restrained warfare. She recounted the events carefully, showing sensor logs and tactical recordings that the council members watched with growing unease. When she described the Wanderer's firepower and the complete annihilation of the Krill forces, several representatives made gestures of distress. The Krill were a known menace, but they were still living beings, and the casual efficiency with which the humans had destroyed them was disturbing to species who valued all life. "Thank you, Ambassador," Thelcorum said when she finished. "The Council has reviewed your report. The central question now is how the Federation should respond to humanity's unauthorized military action within our sphere of influence." Unauthorized? Liz Vara felt heat rising in her chest. "They saved 3,000 of my people." "No one disputes that," interjected Ambassador Skell Rin of the Corinthian Unity, her tone sharp. "But the manner in which they did so is troubling. The weapons they deployed, the destruction they caused, it speaks to a mindset that is fundamentally incompatible with Federation principles. We are a community built on peaceful coexistence, on measured response, on respect for all sentient life. These humans responded to a crisis by bringing weapons of mass destruction and using them without hesitation." "The Krill are not signatories to any treaty," Liz Vara countered. "They are a genocidal swarm that has destroyed 17 colonies in the past decade. Every species in this chamber has lost people to them, which is precisely why the Federation has established protocols for dealing with Krill incursions," Ambassador Veltrom of the Paxian Alliance said calmly. His species were renowned diplomats capable of mediating the most intractable disputes. "We contain them, redirect them, and when necessary, eliminate them with precision strikes that minimize suffering. What the humans did was wholesale slaughter. There is a difference." Liz Vara wanted to argue. wanted to make them understand that when your world is burning and your people are dying, philosophical debates about the morality of violence become meaningless. But she was a junior ambassador, and these were beings who had spent lifetimes in service to galactic peace. She sat down, frustrated but outmaneuvered. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued for immediately censuring humanity and demanding they surrender their military vessels for decommissioning. Others suggested opening diplomatic channels to educate the humans about proper conduct. A few, mostly species who had themselves suffered at Krill hands, quietly suggested that perhaps humanity's approach had merit. In the end, the Council reached a compromise. They would send an official delegation to Earth to meet with human leadership and assess whether humanity was ready for Federation membership. The delegation would be led by Ambassador Veltrom himself, and they would make clear that while the Federation appreciated humanity's intervention at Theta 7, such displays of force would not be tolerated in the future. It was decided. The delegation would depart within the week. What the Federation Council did not know, and what their intelligence services had failed to detect, was that the UESS Wanderer was not a frontline warship. It was a deep space exploration vessel that happened to be armed, as all human ships were, because humans had learned long ago that the universe was not a safe place. The actual military forces of the United Earth Space Service were something else entirely. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Fleet Admiral Marcus Rodriguez reviewed the same reports that the Federation Council had debated. Unlike the various ambassadors and diplomats light years away, he was not concerned with philosophical questions about proportional force or the sanctity of life. He was concerned with the fact that humanity had just painted a target on itself. "They're coming here," his intelligence chief said, standing beside the holographic display that showed Federation space and the various forces deployed throughout it. Diplomatic delegation, official channels, all very proper. "They want to assess us." "Assess whether we're civilized enough to join their club," Rodriguez said dryly. "Did Chen give them any trouble after the battle?" "No, sir." Captain Chen followed protocols perfectly. She offered to assist with reconstruction, provided medical supplies from Wanderer's stores, and maintained a respectful but professional distance. "The Valorians love her. The Federation Council apparently thinks she's a war criminal," Rodriguez snorted. "Chen used maybe 10% of Wanderer's actual capabilities. If they think that was excessive force, they're going to have a stroke when they see our actual military assets." "Should we hide them, sir, when the delegation arrives?" It was a serious question. Humanity's first contact with the galactic community had not gone according to anyone's plan. The original strategy had been careful observation, gradual introduction, and a slow integration that would allow both sides to adjust. Instead, one colony's distress call and one captain's decision to help had thrust humanity onto the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. Rodriguez considered the options. They could present Earth as a peaceful world, show the delegation their cities and universities, their art and culture, and downplay the military capabilities that came from evolving on a planet that had spent most of its history trying to kill them. It might work. It might convince the Federation that humans were just another species, perhaps a bit rough around the edges but ultimately harmless, or they could be honest. "No," Rodriguez said finally. "We don't hide anything. The delegation wants to assess humanity. Fine. Let them see who we really are. Let them see our history, our struggles, our wars, and our peace. Let them understand that we're not violent because we enjoy it. We're capable of violence because our world demanded it and we survived. That's a risk, sir. Everything's a risk. But if we start this relationship with deception, it'll poison everything that follows. Better they know what they're dealing with from the start." The intelligence chief nodded, made a note on his datapad, and left to begin preparations. Rodriguez remained, staring at the display and thinking about the galaxy humanity was about to enter. Out there were hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, and apparently a set of rules that everyone followed. Rules about how to fight, when to fight, and how much force was acceptable. Humanity had rules too, written in blood over thousands of years of warfare. Rules like, protect those who cannot protect themselves, and never give an enemy a second chance to kill you, and when you go to war, you go to win. Those rules had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues, through world wars and nuclear standoffs, through every crisis that their hellish little world had thrown at them. The question was whether those rules would make them heroes in the eyes of the galaxy, or monsters. The Federation delegation arrived at Earth 2 weeks later, traveling aboard the diplomatic vessel Serene Passage. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of humanity's home system and immediately began scanning, cataloging, and analyzing everything they could detect. What they found confused them. Earth's star was unremarkable, a yellow dwarf of average size and stability, but the system itself was chaotic in a way that suggested either poor luck or divine punishment. The inner planets were scorched rocks or toxic hellscapes. The outer planets were frozen giants with crushing gravity and lethal radiation. And in the habitable zone, barely clinging to existence, was Earth itself. Ambassador Veltrom studied the initial surveys with growing disbelief. The planet was a disaster. Its axial tilt created extreme seasonal variations. Its weather patterns included hurricanes that could level cities, tornadoes that could tear apart forests, and storm systems that covered entire continents. The geological activity was intense, with volcanic eruptions and earthquakes occurring regularly. The oceans were filled with massive predators. The land supported an ecosystem that seemed designed around the principle of eating or being eaten, and humans had not just survived here. They had thrived, built civilizations, reached for the stars. "Request permission to approach Earth," Veltrom transmitted, using the standardized greeting protocols that every Federation species recognized. The response came within seconds, in flawless galactic common. "Federation vessel Serene Passage, this is Earth Traffic Control. You are cleared for approach to coordinates being transmitted now. Welcome to humanity's home." The Serene Passage descended through Earth's atmosphere, and the delegation got their first real look at the world that had produced the UESS Wanderer. They passed over vast cities of glass and steel, agricultural regions that fed billions, industrial centers that hummed with activity. Everything was larger, denser, more intense than the delegation members were used to. Even the colors seemed brighter, the air seemed heavier. The gravity pulled at them in ways that made movement uncomfortable. They landed at a designated site in what humans called Geneva, a city that housed many of their international organizations. A human delegation was waiting, led by Secretary General Maria Santos, who served as the primary coordinator for Earth's unified government. The meeting began formally with all the proper diplomatic courtesies. But Veltrom could sense tension beneath the pleasant words. These humans knew why the Federation delegation was here. They knew they were being judged. "Secretary General," Veltrom began once the formalities were complete, "the Federation Council has asked me to convey their gratitude for your assistance at Theta 7. Lives were saved because of your intervention." "We were happy to help," Santos replied. She was a small woman by human standards, elderly, with gray hair and eyes that suggested she had seen much in her life. "We received a distress call. We responded. That's what any decent species would do." "Indeed. However, the manner of your response has raised questions. The level of force employed was, by Federation standards, excessive. We are hoping to understand the decision-making process that led to such destructive action." Santos exchanged glances with the military officers flanking her. "Ambassador, with respect, the Krill were attempting to exterminate a colony. They had numerical superiority and were systematically destroying all defenses. Captain Chen used the force necessary to protect innocent lives. No more, no less. But the complete destruction of the Krill force," Veltrom pressed gently. "Surely some could have been disabled, captured, or driven off without killing them all." There was a long silence. When Santos spoke again, her voice was colder. "Ambassador, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you deserve honesty. Humanity evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, diseases that killed a third of our population at a time, and predators that saw us as food. We learned that when something tries to kill you, you don't disable it or capture it. You eliminate the threat completely, because if you don't, It will come back and finish what it started. That philosophy seems antithetical to peaceful coexistence. That philosophy kept us alive long enough to develop peaceful coexistence, Santos corrected. Ambassador, humans are capable of incredible compassion, cooperation, and creativity. We build hospitals and universities. We write poetry and compose music. We explore the universe because we're curious about what's out there. But we also remember that the universe is dangerous, and we're prepared to meet that danger with everything we have. Those two things are not contradictory. They're complementary. Veltrom considered this. His own species, the Paxians, came from a world of mild climate and abundant resources. Predators were small and easily avoided. Natural disasters were rare. His people had developed philosophy and art and science without the constant pressure of survival that humans described. Perhaps that was why the Federation's approach to conflict seemed so inadequate to this species. The Federation has rules about acceptable force, he said carefully. If humanity wishes to join our community, you would need to abide by those rules. Santos smiled, but it was not a warm expression. Ambassador, we would be happy to follow your rules of engagement, but only if you can guarantee that every hostile species in the galaxy will also follow them. Can you do that? Can you promise us that if we agree to use only non-lethal force and proportional response, the Krill and every other threat out there will do the same? Of course he could not. No one could. The galaxy was vast and filled with species of every temperament and inclination. The Federation maintained peace among its members through diplomacy and cooperation. But beyond their borders, the rules were whatever each species decided they were. I see your point, Veltrom admitted. But surely you understand our concern. Your capabilities far exceed those of most Federation species. If humanity joined us and continued to use maximum force in every conflict, the balance of power would shift dramatically. We don't want to shift any balance, Santos said firmly. We don't want to conquer anyone or impose our will. We just want to exist, to explore, to live our lives in peace. But if someone threatens us or threatens innocence under our protection, we will respond with everything we have, not because we're violent, but because we understand the cost of weakness. The meeting continued for hours, covering topics from human history to military doctrine to social structure. The Federation delegation learned about 2 world wars that had killed millions. They learned about the nuclear standoff that had brought humanity to the brink of self-annihilation. They learned about pandemics, natural disasters, and countless struggles that had shaped human civilization. They also learned about human medicine that could cure diseases once thought incurable. They learned about human engineering that could build structures on the most hostile environments. They learned about human art that expressed emotions in ways that transcended language. They learned that humans were complex, contradictory, and absolutely sincere in their desire for peace, even as they maintained weapons capable of destroying planets. When the formal meetings concluded, Veltrom requested a private conversation with Admiral Rodriguez, who had been present but largely silent during the diplomatic discussions. Admiral, Veltrom said when they were alone, I would like to understand your military forces more completely. The UESS Wanderer impressed the Council, but I sense that ship does not represent your full capabilities. Rodriguez regarded the alien ambassador for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. It doesn't. Would you like to see what our actual military looks like? I believe I must, to make an accurate report to the Council. Rodriguez led Veltrom to a secure briefing room and activated a holographic display. What appeared made the ambassador's hearts race with something approaching fear. The display showed dozens of vessels, each one larger and more heavily armed than the Wanderer. Dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, carriers that launched fighters by the hundreds, arsenal ships that were essentially flying weapons platforms, and at the center of it all, the flagships of humanity's defense fleets, vessels so massive that they could be seen from planetary orbit with the naked eye. This is Battle Group Sol, Rodriguez explained, our home defense fleet. Similar groups protect our colonies and patrol our borders. Each battle group has enough firepower to sterilize a planet if necessary, though we hope that necessity never arises. Why? Veltrom asked, genuinely confused. Why maintain such overwhelming force if you desire peace? Because peace is not given, Ambassador. It's maintained. Every human alive knows that. We tried the alternative. We tried hoping that everyone would be reasonable, that conflicts could be solved with words, that goodwill was enough. And we learned, painfully, that sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the only thing that prevents violence is the credible threat of superior violence. It's a harsh lesson, but our world taught it to us over and over until we finally learned. Veltrom stared at the display, understanding and rejecting the logic simultaneously. His people had never needed such weapons. The Federation had never embraced such a philosophy. But he could not deny that it had kept humanity alive and allowed them to reach for the stars. "What would you do?" he asked quietly. "If the Federation refused your membership? If we declared you too dangerous to join our community?" Rodriguez turned to face him directly. "We'd respect your decision. We'd stay in our space, continue our own development, and maintain peaceful relations if possible. But, Ambassador, understand this clearly. Whether the Federation accepts us or not, humanity is here. We're not going away. We're not going to disarm just because other species find our capabilities uncomfortable. And if another colony somewhere sends out a distress call and we hear it, we're going to respond, because that's who we are." Veltrom left Earth 3 days later with more questions than answers. His report to the Federation Council would be nuanced, detailed, and ultimately inconclusive. Humanity was dangerous, yes, but not in the way that a hostile species was dangerous. They were dangerous the way that a natural disaster was dangerous, a force of nature that could not be reasoned with or controlled, only accommodated and directed. The question facing the Federation was whether they wanted to try to accommodate a species whose entire existence was a reminder that the universe was not as safe and orderly as they preferred to believe. The Federation Council's debate over humanity's potential membership stretched across weeks and became increasingly heated. Traditional power blocks within the Federation found themselves fractured as species reconsidered long-held positions. The Methodian Collective and the Paxian Alliance, both advocates of strict peaceful principles, argued for either rejecting humanity outright or requiring them to disarm before membership could be considered. The Valorian Conclave and several other species who had faced existential threats advocated strongly for accepting humanity as they were. But while ambassadors and counselors talked, events in the wider galaxy moved forward with uncaring momentum. The Zelthran sovereignty had been a minor irritant to the Federation for decades. They occupied a cluster of systems on the frontier, raided occasionally across the border, and generally behaved like pirates with delusions of legitimacy. The Federation had tried diplomacy, economic sanctions, and limited military responses. Nothing had worked. But the Zelthran never escalated enough to warrant serious retaliation. That changed when they attacked the Lumina Science Station. Lumina 3 was a research facility operated by the Centauran Accord, dedicated to studying the unique properties of a nearby nebula. It housed 57 scientists and their families, all civilians, all protected by Federation treaty. The Zelthran assault came without warning. Their ships emerged from hyperspace and immediately opened fire on the station's minimal defenses. Within an hour, they had boarded the facility and taken everyone hostage. Their demands were simple. The Federation would cede 3 systems in the disputed border region, or they would begin executing hostages. They gave the Council 72 hours to respond. The emergency Council session was chaotic. Some members demanded immediate military action. Others urged negotiation. The Centauran representatives begged for help. And through it all, the Zelthran threat hung like a blade, counting down with mechanical precision. Admiral Kestarn of the Federation Defense Force presented military options, all of them unsatisfying. A direct assault would likely result in hostage deaths. A siege could take months and might still end in tragedy. Negotiating would set a precedent that hostage-taking was effective, which would encourage future attacks. What about the humans? Someone asked. Ambassador Liz Vara, who had been attending the Council sessions more regularly since the Theta 7 incident. They're still in Federation space. The Wanderer is only 2 days from Lumina. The chamber fell silent. Everyone present knew what she was suggesting. Everyone also knew what it would mean. The humans are not Federation members, Thelcorum said carefully. We have no authority to order them into combat. and their involvement would complicate the political situation considerably. With respect, Chair, there is no political situation if those scientists are executed.